Hello, it's Neal Romanek, and welcome to another Flint Forum webinar. And this time we're going to be looking at virtual production. Is virtual production media and entertainment's most powerful sustainability tool? I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to have a discussion about virtual production sustainability. Virtual production is, it's essentially being able to move things onto a set with using digital technology, backgrounds and the like, to do things that you would normally do on location. That allows you potentially to save travel and transport, going to different locations, having to build sets, and there are little other benefits too, which we're going to talk about. So before we get started, I would like to invite you all to sign up to the Flint newsletter, which there's a link to in the chat if you are in the room, and if you're watching recording of this, please do sign up. I'm sure there will be a link somewhere down there, wherever that is, in the show notes, in the comments, and the something or other in the bio. The Flint is a publication that covers sustainability in the media and entertainment industry, and sustainability from many different angles. That's not just the environment, that's also people. People are a really essential part of everything we do. When you start talking about the environment, you very quickly start talking about people, and you can't get around the fact that the environmental crisis and other associated crises are about people and the well-being of people. So when we look at virtual production today, we may talk a lot about the environment, we may talk about carbon, we may talk about emissions, but ultimately we're looking at human welfare, and I think that there's going to be some interesting stuff around that as well with virtual production. So I'd like to introduce our amazing guests. Really excited to have them on. We have with us today, sorry guys, with us today, Gerhard from Vizrt. We've got Christina Nowak from the New Chapter Productions. We've got Ralf van Vegten from Zero Density. And we also have James Hakesley from the Cube. And hi guys, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Just very, very quickly, let's go through, and if you could just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, so everybody can get up to speed about your who we're talking to, and then we'll get into our questions. Christina, do you want to go first?
Sure. So my name, Christina Nowak. I founded New Chapter Production. So New Chapter Production is a consultancy in the film, television industry, and we do a whole host of services from analytics, production intelligence, brokering relationships between crew, specializing in virtual production as well, and most specifically, and guiding people through the kind of enigma that is virtual production, whether that's technologically, commercially, how to operate a studio with it effectively, and founder or co-founder of Women in Virtual Production as well, which is a global group of women all around the world, regardless of what their role is in virtual production, where we create a community and resources of production case studies and conversations to create a tribe.
Great, thank you. James?
Hi everyone, I'm James Hakesley, so I'm co-founder and CEO at Cube Studio. We're a virtual production studio just outside central London. We've been working in virtual production pretty much since the pandemic, driven by needing to shoot some commercials that needed to be in multiple locations and having to find a solution for it. We opened our first studio in May last year, and we largely work with advertising, corporate storytelling, and film and TV. And we also deliver a lot of our services on set at other studios around the UK.
Thanks. Gerhard?
Yeah, my name is Gerhard Lang. I'm the CTO of Vizrt. I've been with Vizrt for almost 24 years, and this is around the time span that we've been working with virtual production. We want to expand that technology, the green screen environment as well. So Vizrt is a software provider for visual storytelling. So we cover a lot of aspects in that area with our tools. But we also do have a group of people that are located in customer success, and they are advisors for people in productions, giving them an advice on which sort of technology to use and helping them to get it up off the ground and use it in the most efficient way there is.
Gerhard, I think
Great.
I worked with you back in the day when I was at NCAM camera tracking.
Absolutely, yes.
This very small world. I think we all run into people.
Nick and Sam Boygan, right? You were still there, yeah.
Nice. Ralf.
Yes, Ralf of Vegten. Actually, you pronounced my name really well, so that's impressive. Based in the Netherlands, working for Zero Density, so virtual production and real-time motion graphics software company. Founded in Turkey, and now we have the headquarters in Izmir and the go-to-market office in Amsterdam, so the Netherlands. Before I joined Zero Density about a year ago, I worked for NEP, so media technology provider, like 1,000 people in the Netherlands, and I was the managing director over there. And in the Netherlands, like I live 5 meters below sea level, so I have a special interest in sustainability to not impact the climate any further. So in Netherlands, it's like a really big topic. I see it in Europe being a big topic, but I don't see it being a big topic outside of Europe, strangely enough. So I'm curious what this discussion will bring.
Thanks, Ralf. Well, and we are the Flint does have an international reach, and half of our audience is in the US. So we're about half US, 1/4 Europe, and 1/4 UK. So there are people out there who are interested. And of course, it's not going to go away, this stuff. So yeah, just maybe start off with some temperature taking, and ask you guys, what is the conversation you've been hearing about sustainability, specifically as it applies to virtual production, kind of in your businesses, talking to colleagues, talking to customers? Is it something that comes up? Is sustainability on their radar? Is it all just about the money? And maybe that varies from job to job, region to region. But maybe, I don't know, James, do you want to speak to that first? Because you're running a facility, you're kind of dealing with different customers all the time coming in.
Yeah, sure. So, at a peak, sometimes we're doing 8 to 10 tours a week, right? So we have a lot of people coming through the studio thinking about utilizing virtual production. So yeah, sustainability is on the agenda of some of those people that come in. The way I would position it is usually virtual production's on someone's agenda for a reason, okay? So it's usually people are leaning into that. So it could be efficiency, it could be deadlines, it could be talent, location, and availability. And some people, it could be purely because they're carbon conscious, have net zero targets as a brand or as a business. But what I find is all of these things kind of channel into the sustainable factor. But a lot of people don't realize what those conscious decisions are making actually do have a sustainable impact. So if you are looking to be more efficient, then we are driving that narrative into saying, that does make your production more sustainable. So it's definitely on the agenda for a lot of people. The most people that come through the studio and talk about it tend to be kind of some of the tech companies. We had a lot of work that was associated around COP28, where brands were actively marketing or advertising or creating content for that. So when there's a carbon event or something in the calendar, we find there's a few brands that are then saying, okay, we have to do this piece of content in the most sustainable way. So yeah, it's on the agenda for the majority of people, but there's still some people that we're very much educating on the impact it can have.
I guess would it be, it's, if you're dealing with advertisers and brands and things, that can be something that's like job to job to job. They may have like different agencies working on different jobs. So you may not have consistency of consistency of approach, I would think, through that whole thing.
Yeah.
Because of things being so bitty.
Yeah, it does vary. Like campaign to campaign, pretty much. And there are some businesses out there that also want to do something in a sustainable way, but still sometimes choose not to. So I've also seen some interesting journeys through the years on that kind of stuff. But I think once a brand has decided that they're gonna go all in on that, it's about how much they can then lean into that. What data can they get? What reports can they get? And then when you understand all that stuff can be wrapped around the campaign, people are then definitely really interested in the sustainable angle on it. But sometimes we are having to, signpost what those might be and what those benefits are. And we actively do that within our demos. Sometimes we are showing examples of stuff where, here's an example of stuff that was shot here. Here's what the impact would have been had it been done on location, just so that we're also educating the people that do come through the building.
And then what about, say, Ralf and Gerhard? Maybe Ralf, you can start, but that you're providing technology and tools. So what about people coming to you? I guess, you have broadcasters, production companies. Is that part of what they're thinking, or are they looking at it?
As I said, it's very much depending on the region that they are from. So from European customers, we see a lot of the questions regarding sustainability topics, and we also actively pitch it. To be honest, from the United States, we don't see those questions coming a lot. But we have provided, we see it as a tool for being more sustainable as a company. And we actively push it out, and we actively tell the story. And then it resonates, and then people see the upside. But you need to in most of the cases, we need to bring up the advantages from that perspective. But our more corporate clients, they see it as a sustainability tool, like to reduce their CO2 carbon footprint. So I think it's depending on region and also depending on the industry that we provide the technology to.
And Gerhard?
Well, I have not experience with the region. In general, sustainability and reducing the carbon footprint is a huge topic for all our customers. We got mainly tier one broadcasters as customers in the area where virtual production would be a topic. But the portfolio that we offer, is quite large, and every single aspect of that really has always the topic sustainability in it. Whether this is centralized production for standard graphics or whether it's virtual productions. In the end, the reduction of the carbon footprint is a topic. Sometimes reduced and overshadowed by the amount of money that is there to spend. But there is a ton of aspects, not just bringing people to locations. Also, we got half news and half sports customers. So for news, it's about building a studio, and it's about saving building material and not having to tear it down on a regular basis and rebuild it, and basically creating waste that way, and also have a bigger variety of studio decorations available for almost zero impact when it comes to generated waste. But for news, it's also on top, because you mentioned the human aspect in the beginning, on top of saving carbon, it's also about keeping the human in a safer place. So if you want to transport them, for example, in a crisis area, that is much easier and much more believable with a virtual production. Now with sports, it is about saving the travel, obviously, getting people to location, from location, and have them interact with each other. And there is quite a few aspects that we could cover there, but I'm not quite sure about the time. Teleportation, for example, into the studio, into the virtual production, that is a huge topic for us as well, specifically in sport, more than in news, to save the people from traveling to getting interviewed or, be inside and be an expert. You still can have like a natural conversation, even though you're in totally different locations at the time.
Yeah, that's and maybe Christina, you can talk about that too, because you're talking with professionals of all kinds working in virtual production, and the organization that you started, women specifically. But what are some of the things you're seeing in terms of those benefits with virtual production?
I think, well, before I go to the benefits, to your original question, which is an excellent one, I've noticed the kind of pioneers of the conversation, if you like, do tend to be producers. If we're talking film specifically, they are kind of very much driven by the BAFTA We Are Albert sustainability program, but of course that's still developing how it relates more specifically to VP. So there's a long way to go on that in terms of giving them structure. This doesn't account for all, of course, but I would say a majority of producers and department heads in that regard probably have the least tools and knowledge and resources to make the decisions, because a lot of the visual effects supervisors or cinematographers have been learning virtual production, and it's such a complex piece that unless you really understand the script and what's being shot and how that breaks down to what can and can't be done, which isn't necessarily the producer's job, right? Not traditionally anyway. Their job, you know, depending on if it's creative or line producing, very much set on potentially like the finance side. So in order to like even quote for them, you can't, it's not like buying a car where you're like, is it auto or is it manual? Because it depends on, okay, well, how big do you need it to be? And that will depend on the script. And what scenes have you got? Okay, well, then that will depend if you need camera tracking or not, or content generated, or if we project. So that's just from like the shooting perspective. But if you add sustainability into the mix as well, without having kind of the structures there, a lot of it is just kind of good intent at the moment. So the other pioneers being studios. So RD and Garden Studios and Park Royal are a good example. They have kind of worked with sustainability in mind with their studio infrastructure. So they are trying to analyze the data on, you know, mathematically how sustainable it is in real terms. If we break it down to more of a conversational piece that's digestible for productions, Gerhard obviously mentioned travel. So one example is the Ellie Goulding music video. That was virtual production. It was slated to be a 2-week shoot in Africa, and it was managed to be done on a volume in 2 days. So in terms of like the amount of crew it would have taken, the carbon emissions for the planes, etc., yes. And also the amount of equipment and driving and individual commuting time, that goes down with VP. So it's not just about on location, so you don't have to use a plane. It's like, actually, how many more days does it save of those carbon emission savings too? So it is quite an in-depth conversation that still needs to be had. And there certainly needs to be more like analytical measures on, is actually the energy being used even on those 2 days? How does that equate to carbon emissions compared to fuel? So we're a bit far off that yet, and I think it's getting there, but then also adoption rate to do those analytics is taking time. And that could be because this is an emerging tool, right? So less than 10% of productions use it. If it was maybe more widely adopted, then that kind of sustainability initiative might be have faster momentum. Even sustainability outside of virtual production has taken years to where it's got to now. I remember my first job at like 17, 18. Everyone was talking about how sustainable cloud computing was, but cloud computing only just went to market. So again, it was a conversational piece. So I think I have confidence in the next 2 to 5 years, we'll be in a lot firmer position where there's almost like a checklist and a tool to make that assessment a lot easier. But the benefits, I mean, there are a host. There are a host of challenges and there are a host of benefits. And I would say, certainly in terms of the benefits, you can be a lot smarter with the pre-production, the planning of the content by doing virtual production. So if you ensure, you guarantee that time and spend at the beginning, then you can have a lot and a more effective shoot, which will ultimately be a more successful shoot, but also more sustainable. It just avoids so much more wastage. If you think about a project that's not been planned well, like putting an LED volume in a warehouse with no aircon in the summer, it is going to overheat. If you can just really put everything in layman's terms, it's a big TV with lots of media servers and processors. Imagine like a laptop times 100,000, and you're putting it in an environment like that. So you'll lose shoot days. The the power outage, everything to kickstart that's not sustainable. It's really not a good use of electricity. But you plan it properly, I mean, my goodness, everyone will know the frame, everyone will know their cues and placements, everything will be succinct, energy can be measured, you'll even probably be, I mean, a lot of people don't do this, but how much like data is the content going to be, and how long does that take to process, and how many processes do you even need for that? These calculations could be done in advance. Not many do. And all these intricate details all contribute to sustainability. It's not just tech and workflow for DITs and visual effects houses.
That's I mean that's some really great points. I think that's you know, that ability to control things is kind of why you're on a set to begin with. And I'm like, it's interesting to sort of see these loops. Like that's where the movie industry started with, we're gonna have everything in one giant factory. And why would you go shoot something on location? We can just do it here in the studio, you know, in the 1940s and 50s. We'll do everything here. I'm not going to shoot, we're not going to do our product out there in the middle of the desert. We'll create a desert here on stage.
And theoretically, set design, right? I mean, the whole point of the LED volume is for blending. A lot of people have this kind of unsatisfactory experience because they look at the volume and they say, oh, well, that doesn't look photorealistic. Well, it's from a gaming engine. It's not meant to, it's meant to be blended. That's why it's called in-camera visual effects, right? So it's the final image that looks good. It's not what you see on the camera, is not what you see on the screen. And then because it's all contained in a space, because these walls can only be so big, right? Because they are expensive. And if it is for blending, then you've planned your shot for the blend. So you don't need to design. I mean, Snow White at Pinewood was it Snow White? I think it was. I went on that set and my God, it was like Disneyland for film. Like, the attention to detail and the craftsmanship was stunning. But you obviously wouldn't need to build a whole platform and like fake shops and like even the bunnies hanging in the shop made out of wood, you know, all real, all handcrafted. Like that level of set design is not required with VP. So also in terms of raw materials, and wasting that, or do you store that and more expenditure there? Like that comes down too. That doesn't mean you can't even achieve some of those looks. It's just you need a lot less to get the same effect. And of course, that doesn't apply. That's not one rule. That doesn't apply to every shot because VP can't do every shot yet.
So it's, I mean, it does sound like there's a lot of education that needs to happen, but we kind of aren't really, we don't have all the data yet to educate people with, I guess. So, you know, people sort of come and sort of say, we need to do sustainability, blah, 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 sustainability, but may not have an idea about sort of what that means. I mean, are you able to, James, and are you able to collect a lot of data, useful data for people? I mean, you must be all the time with all the different shoots you're doing, but is there a set of data or a set of practices that you can develop to help customers when they come in for this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's method to capturing of that data. I think it's, but it's the thing there. What we always say is like, you want to do that, like plan to do that right at the start of a project. Sometimes projects end up here like far too late, and they decide they want to do VP, and then back tracing everything they've done to get to that point. So we always say to someone, if you're in the inception or just about to embark on pre-production and you decide you want to measure that properly, then there are obviously tools you can use. You know, in advertising, there's the ad green calculator that people use, and to measure that. And then I think, yeah, it's just understanding that. But I would say something on that as well is it's really important to do it and measure it. But, you know, when you start having that conversation with a client and you say, actually, that's almost someone's full-time job on this shoot. We almost need someone who's going to manage that calculator because it takes a lot of effort, right? So every single thing is measured through that point. And then if you put a price on that, it's interesting how many brands then decide whether they want to measure their footprint or not. But I think it's the kind of thing that moving forwards, like all studios really should have a rate within their rate card to measure that data and provide it. And, you know, if a brand says they have these net zero targets and they want to do this stuff, they have to stand by that and also pay for it to be done properly. And Otherwise, it becomes a half attempt at doing it, and it's not 100% realistic. Then I think there's that relationship between the production company and the studio. So we've had this recently where we had a shoot in here for one of the large broadcasters in the UK, and obviously that was run under kind of the Albert sustainable regulations sort of thing. So we had to have every single thing intricately measured and designed here to make sure that we adhere to those rules. So there's then conscious decisions that you're educating the production companies on and the people using it. So simple things like making sure that your catering has, sustainable packaging, and making sure that there's composting on site. And believe me, get into composting. No one wants to take composting off of you. It's an interesting thing there. If anyone wants to do composting in the UK, it could be a big business as we try to get more sustainable, because councils don't seem to support it. The local tips don't support it. You have to go to specialist people to get rid of it. So that's also interesting learning for everyone working on those productions. But there's also thinking about all the things that go into it, right? There's a whole supplier ecosystem of stuff that has to get here for a production to happen. So great, we have fully renewable energy here. We have measures to minimize those things. We have reusable bottles, drinking water, whatever that might be, to reduce plastic. But then if everything's turning up to the production and it's coming on a diesel 7-ton lorry, then all of a sudden you're throwing some of this stuff out of the way. So then it's making conscious decisions in your supply chain. So that's another area we're trying to say, look, you need to measure that stuff and get data from those guys. So using hire companies that have electric vehicles, sustainable methods to get equipment and stuff here, so that you can really then present real data all the way through the pipeline, not just from the shoot day onwards, it looked like this. It needs to be from day one to have some realistic information. But to do that, you need someone to own it. We are seeing in some of the companies that we're working with, especially the corporates, as Gerhard pointed out, and is essentially they're starting to introduce kind of chief sustainable officers or head of sustainability, and these brands are now making sure that they're fully involved in the production. So you're starting to see roles within some of our companies that we work with to actually really start thinking about this, so that they can actually drive the agenda and measure it. But yeah, it's very important. Data in, data out, evidence ultimately.
To James's point, there does need to be proper ownership, a job in itself. Like there's a new role on set called wellbeing facilitator. You don't have to have it, but if you do, they look after people's mental health on set, report problems, blah, blah, blah. And there needs to be a sustainability person, right? Because it is a full-time job and it is money. And unfortunately, we're in an industry where like time is money and it's everyone's bottom line. So until that's addressed, and the difficult thing is that it's not easy. So forgetting like the measurements and the tools that you'd need and the time, there is no automated process to download all this data. Like this is unfortunately like the hardship of visual effects, even before VP. So you have to measure the metadata on the lighting, then the volume, and then the camera tracking. And there is no like lovely system that just collates it all nicely, distributes that out remotely, and everyone's working to the same hymn sheet or standard, if you like. So if you have to, what most people actually do is write it down on a pad or put it in Excel and kind of like whisk everything off at different times in different ways. And the visual effects team have to make the best of it, or the DIT. And that system alone, like, would a sustainability person be trained to know that and do that? Because that's on the tech side, right? But then it does boil down to, the tech can't automate that process yet. So where does that converge?
Yeah, and often a sustainability person, as you're talking about cost, the sustainability person is the sort of the hippie production assistant. There's somebody who really wants to do this, great, you do it, and let us know how it goes.
We need
and then if those,
that's what we need.
If those people stick with it, I think they're gonna, in about not many years, those people are going to have pretty cushy jobs because everybody's going to need those. But I think also in terms of like being tech providers, so Gerhard and Ralf, that you're like having to, people can't keep, as we've just discovered, can't keep all this stuff in their heads, and they're like, guys, can you just solve this for us? Because I really don't know where to start. Is that part of your job, is to figure that out for them?
I found it extremely interesting that Christina brought up the amount of data that gets processed and what sort of an impact it is, because I mean, obviously the LED emission is causing quite a big impact, but how you get the data there and how you get those LEDs to emit, that process has many flavors. And when we designed an architecture, the latest iteration of our XR set, we had in mind to keep the amount of components to as little as possible, and rely on things like AI also to, for example, have to create less pixel, but in the end populate more pixel to make it more believable. So the sustainability aspect, of course, together with the cost aspect, one of the driving factors why we redid our XR implementation from scratch about 3 years ago now, I think, So we got one box that basically powers a whole LED wall, and we also distribute the signals using standard infrastructure that you find inside DV Studio, so you do not have to add another layer of infrastructure, switches, distribution, and so on. So keep all of those components to the bare minimum, also the in-between steps, so you do not utilize unnecessary amount of devices to get your signal right to the LED screens. So we took that very seriously. I mean, Vizrt, I think in general, is very conscious about that. We're a European company first and foremost. This is where we started. Like the whole building I'm sitting in here, for example, has 0 active air conditioning. We're using groundwater for heating and for air conditioning and for cooling our devices. And all of this is done with sustainable energy coming from power plants driven by water from the mountains. So, when we architect all of that, we also kept that in mind. It's like, look, I mean, this is going to replicate. We're going to distribute that amount of systems. Like if you're looking at some of our customers, they have 7, 8, 11 studios. So if you have to put in 10 computers to create a volume, or if you have to put in 1 computer, it's cost saving for them. But in the end, the power consumption should not be underestimated here. If they're on air 24/7 and so on, it makes a huge difference, specifically in air conditioning as well, not just the primary power consumption. So to answer the question, yes, that aspect is in our mind whenever we create something new.
And you were talking about data, that all that data along the pipeline. So we're gathering a lot of data, then that's going to be stored somewhere, and then that's going to be moved around, and it's going to be sent to post house or whatever. So you're creating this thing that's going to be, which you do in any production, but potentially you're accumulating a lot more data than you would if you would just shot a couple sitting on a beach.
Ours are mainly live, to be honest. So we got a few customers who produce specifically only for digital, who's using XR sets. We got one lighthouse customer in the Middle East, for example, who does that, who cans it. But the rest of the people do not can all the material. Like this is for live productions, and it's going to be consumed like that.
I mean,
so yeah,
our ideal world would be if we shot this as we plan without VP, and then we strategically went through the same process and saw what that would look like. Let's do the carbon emissions and everything and the energy output now, and then we'll factually know like for like, or make sure as a standard we record this. But unfortunately, most people don't even do the pre-production process appropriately, and it is more just how much would a volume cost. Take the script, what's the quickest shoot time and the cost, and then it's kind of, and that's not comparable, because you do have to look through and be intelligent with your content way in advance of shoot day. So hopefully there will be like a little advocate out there that will do that. Maybe Cube one day. It's not impossible. It's just work.
Well, looking at like so,
I think the actually with the point that you raised is I wrote it down is that like the whole pre-production effort with this type of technology becomes increasingly more important, because we have seen a lot of productions where everybody saw the holy grail in large LED volumes, and they set up the set and they shot, and then they came to post-production and directors were saying, okay, like the horizon is maybe a little bit too high for my liking, and then they had to rotoscope the whole set, do everything again in post-production, and that did not really like help the carbon footprint of the production, because they basically had to do everything twice. So like on one hand, you need to make sure that your whole pre-production process changes, but also like the whole LED world. Sorry for that, James, but the whole LED production is also, in some instances, it's a bit overrated, and it's highly expensive LED volumes that consume huge amounts of energy, because at some point in time people wrote off green screen production, and we deliver both. So we in an essence we don't really care about what people use, but I think the whole green screen technology that we provide is still at an extremely high level. And it gives you much more flexibility also in post-production. So once you record it, you still have the option to redo shots based on the tracking data that you recorded in post-production. So I think it's also important that you don't let the hype take you into a route that you should not be in. I think you need to consider what technology do you use when. And not because everybody is using LED, you should also use LED. I think you need to make a careful assessment of how well can you pre-produce this? How critical is it to have like no post-production workflow or less post-production workflow? Because it's real-time technology, so that the whole idea is that you don't use post-production that much. So you need to think ahead and take the right technology to the right project. And I think in broadcast, I think the green screen setups give you much more flexibility, and it's much more convincing. It looks better. The carbon footprint is lower. So I think don't follow the hype, but buy what you actually need.
I think that comes down to benefits, though, Ralf, because everything you said is factually correct, but LED gives you the reflections without having to worry about all the green and blue that might bounce, and it gives cues that are real time for the talent, and it allows for certain adjustments through
but that's exactly what I mean. That's the hype. Because that can be like, if you have the right compositing pipeline, then you don't have the green spill. Like if you use projection, green on green projection, like if your keying technology is on point, like ours, I could say, then you can use green on green projection. Your talent has like a great idea of where it needs to look at. So like we have gone into a certain direction, and we support it. Our technology supports it. We also have clients that use it successfully. But to say it should apply to every project because of this and this and this, that is not true. Even like now with AI tools coming up, where you could relight talent in real time. So you can insert AI components in your compositing pipeline, and you can relight talent in real time, like have the light from the environment cast on the talent. You have new LED panels that you can control the LEDs, on the individual basis. So you can make the LED panels that are above the green screen mimic basically the virtual environment. That is all there. So
Christina knows about relighting, because I think Yancam was the company that actually pioneered that.
Yes.
So and that's a while ago. And bringing clues to a virtual studio or a green screen, can be done in a ton of ways. But it is not the same as having a real environment to look at, and depends on how long you're standing there. And when it comes to the green screen, you got the pure green screen environment, but you can also do like virtual green screen. For example, we cooperate with Flu and Megapixel for ghost frame technology. So you have the possibility to shoot but you can also later on go into post with the recorded tracking data and replace the green screen information that was recorded in a different time slot. So, I mean, there is no specific answer to that.
But that doesn't really make it more sustainable, Gerhard.
I
Well,
think
sure that's not
there's
the point.
I think my two
so is there
cents
that
probably really quick, Neal, would be there is no right and wrong. Nothing, no technology is like for like. You've got to use the production technique that's right for your production, and that will vary. And it's no different to using a film camera or a digital camera. They both do their job, but what is the benefits and what's against it for what you're doing? And LED and AR and green screen and on-set extension, and we can go on, but they're all there to serve, and they'll all have a different impact that still needs to get assessed for sustainability. I don't think anyone can quantify it if there's a like for like analysis on which one is more sustainable or not, because it's too nuanced.
I want to remind people that we'll be happy to answer your questions if you want to put questions in the chat. But I think there's the interesting thing of like not having the data, but also that sustainability has to be part of I guess the engineering problem of creating a production. So we do have to sort of say, well, we have to get rid of emissions and carbon, and in a lot of cases, even if we're on a green grid, we also have to be thinking in terms of efficiency, because we have to be good energy citizens. Just because water comes out of the tap whenever I want it doesn't mean that I should be using all the water I possibly can. So we do have to start including that as like, well, what really is the more sustainable option? And potentially, I think maybe make that decision over creative decisions. I think we're at a stage where the sustainable choice is going to need to take precedence over the creative choice. But generally, that's probably not really going to be a real, choice. It's not. You'll always find a way to do something cool visually. But I think that's something that's going to be more and more of a must-have rather than a nice-to-have.
I think until we can prove that the more sustainable option also makes the most money, there'll constantly be a push and pull for that decision.
Yeah, I think so. But I think the goal is probably to get to put the sustainability first at this point. Yeah. But practically, if that's the case,
it's the same versus we come up against the conversation of what does it cost to do it on location versus what's the cost to do it in a VP studio, and if those numbers are very close to each other and someone fancies a holiday, then they go and do it they go to Spain, and all of a sudden the sustainable angle's thrown out of the window, and it's a jolly over there to shoot some stuff on the beach. But yeah, as soon as it becomes as soon as you can really prove, there's a cost saving benefit, efficiencies, and on the top of that, there's the sustainable angle, then all of a sudden it becomes a logical choice. I think that's the thing. It's just sometimes these things are so close to each other and there's not a massive gap that some people just go, we did it this way last time, let's go and do that again. And until we can present that gap or that data and it's fact, then people all of a sudden will rush to go, actually, we'll do it this way. 1, it's sustainable. 2, it saved me money. 3, it saved me, and all the benefits are then listed. I think that's an important shift in people's thinking.
And also that gets back to that idea of like, what is going to be best for people? I mean, what is that thing that's going to be like, no, I'd much rather do it here, because then I can get home and see my kids. Then I can I can actually plan for the holiday I want to go on rather than make it a work trip, or whatever it is, And also actually Christina, obviously you do women in virtual production. Are there specific sort of things around virtual production that are, useful in some way to women working in production?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, I
don't know if you've been talking intensively to that group of creatives. I wondered if there's any conversations that have come up that
Well, I can say off the bat, this would apply to any parent, and there's lots of working couples, married couples in film with children, and there's usually one that has to sacrifice for the other to be able to travel or bring the money. So VP does enable like quicker shoot schedules and more domestic shooting, which is obviously helpful. But what I would say, the biggest benefit for women is that because it's an emerging piece of technology, we have a skill shortage. So if you're kind of guaranteed, if you like, consistent work if you can get trained or experienced, because there's just not enough. And then when there is, or there's a bigger job or a non-VP shoot, people might come in and come out. So it kind of gives you that kind of security in a way where you can move across departments, constantly learn new things and become a pioneer on the crew or on set, if you like. And I think it's a lot more open and welcoming as a result, because there isn't this sense of, I've worked with that camera operator for years, so I'm going to take them on every job, because some of the roles are so unique. You haven't got that relationship with someone for like 10 years. You may have worked with that one Unreal artist on one job, but good luck trying to get an Unreal artist. So there is that kind of, for me, that's kind of quite unique. You don't often get an opportunity in your lifetime where there's such a new skill that is rare or in demand that you can weave and go into commercial or film or TV or music, still using the same technology, but expand your experience without taking any kind of career sacrifices. And as a result, that encourages job sharing. So if you're a VP supervisor and you can only do 2 days, but you have a handover with another female VP soup, like that's perfectly acceptable too, especially if you can commute in and seamlessly come through. So there's in terms of like a career path and life balance, and yeah, there are some nuances there. And also if neurodivergent, there are some roles that are literally, I feel, designed for a neurodivergent mindset in virtual production, and it's becoming more of a topic, I've noticed, in the last like 12-18 months. But regardless of like the topic in the press, then yeah, to have that exposure where like the way your brain and thought process works is valuable and accepted, without any hesitation. Like that's not a thing. Please come in. I mean, I think that must be like the most welcoming environment you could hope for in a workplace.
That's really interesting. And we've got probably about 5 more minutes before we wrap up here. We do have a comment, not a question, but a comment from Erica, who was saying, as Ralph's rotoscoping anecdote highlights, I think sustainability definitely requires a measure twice, cut once mentality. Planning is so key. So that idea of, planning, which is essential for sustainability, also happens to be integral to virtual production, which is interesting. And also that planning, just what you were talking about, Christina, there, that being able to plan who you work with. I mean, if you're forced into that planning, you end up being able to plan plan who you work with and how people are going to work potentially in a more thorough way. And I know there's time pressures all the time everywhere. And what usually happens is, as you were saying, you usually just reach for that person who you always work with because there's no time to really think about it, and if you're sort of forced almost at gunpoint to do more planning, you can start, being a bit more thoughtful about who you bring out to shoots, I would think.
It creates a lot of camaraderie on set too, working in VP, because the cinematographer will always learn, I'm sure, something new from the people that are looking after like the brain bar, volume control. There's many names for it. And that kind of knowledge transfer on set literally benefits any job working on that set, which again creates like a nice working environment. There's less silos.
Yeah, it becomes very like collaborative on set. I was sitting in here yesterday watching a music video being made, and the collaboration between the people on the brain bar and the VP supervisor and the EOP and director, they were constantly making adjustments with each other, having each other's back for improving things, and both learning at the same time. So it does create that environment. It is less like I've seen it anyway, less like a film set where it's like oh, there's a bottle of water on the floor there. Not my department. But yeah, more of teamwork, and because it's sometimes it's a new experience. Some people you are there to kind of coach them and give that experience, and that's what we find. Like, we're very much there to kind of partner, collaborate, and provide our experience and into making sure that their experience on set and using VP is a successful one. And if we can interject that knowledge at the beginning as well and in pre-production, and how we need to get through those milestones of signing stuff off, and that there isn't, the goal is to not have loads of changes in post, and the goal is to minimize post, then ultimately that all has a positive, sustainable impact. So yeah, we're all kind of custodians of that.
Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. This is your chance to ask these guys some questions. And I saw that Kate had put in, I thought it was compositing at first, but now she said composting is her passion.
It's a great business idea, James, honestly.
So yeah, Kate does a lot of stuff, but I know also you can read an interview with her that we did on the Flint. But is an enthusiastic composter. So there is a media industry composting link, at least through Kate. So she could probably tell you a lot of good stuff about composting after we're done here. So yeah, I guess we'll wrap up. What does it look like? What does virtual production look like in in 5 years in a fully sustainable media industry? I mean, we've talked about the problems of getting good data and getting good practice, and trying to build up a way to make this work financially and sustainably. But if you can say we've solved all those problems, what is the vision of what we really want it to look like? What would be a great ideal way for virtual production to interact with the rest of the media industry to become this great sustainable resource? Gerhard, do you want to jump on that?
No, as I said, the approach of trying to minimize the components that are required to create such a production, that is key to all of that. The rest is physical constraints that are very hard to overcome. I mean, the lifetime of the LEDs, obviously, that is a big thing as well. Who manufactures LEDs that last a little longer than 3-5 years? Because that is not just, the waste that gets accumulated there is not super consumable, let's put it this way. So composting is definitely not an option for that. I mean, the first person who invents a compostable LED, I think will have, I will invest in that company, that's for sure, because that's going to be a success.
It started
it's
here.
Going to be hard to do, but yeah. So, I mean, science and manufacturing is always pushing the boundaries when it comes to physical limitations. And we've seen the decrease in LED sizes, and we've seen the increase in brightness, to be able to cover all of that. The longevity of LED panels, that is something I know manufacturers are working on, and that will get us there. And then, of course, where you're getting the power from is just as important as how long you run the set. Like running an LED set from a renewable power source. I mean, I'm very lucky because I'm surrounded by mountains. There is water everywhere, and my colleagues in Norway, same thing. There was no shortage on that. In California, where you are. Solar panels have the limitations when it comes to the area that you can cover with that. But so it's important to think about, where do I put that? It's important to think, how do I cool my whole system? What do I use in my building to get rid of the heat emission that is a given? I cannot think that away. Our manufacturers, the people that we work with, spend a great deal on thinking on how to reduce that. Like, if you're using NVIDIA as a good example, they're doing a lot in that respect in making their chips even more powerful, consuming less power, but also thinking about innovative way on how can I generate that amount of pixel with less direct render performance. So for example, using things like deep learning super sampling to upscale or formats or to increase the frame rate, even though I don't have all of those frames rendered, definitely helps reducing the power consumption for all of that. So you see there's a ton of aspects that can be considered and making this more sustainable, making it a way better tool and having actually a zero impact on the environment, even if you're producing a very large LED volume. But it very much depends on your location and the availability of power sources. But that is our take on that. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Right. Ralf, where are we going to be 5 years from now when we sort out all these problems?
Well, it's a very difficult question, obviously, but I think what we don't took into account is the AI component and how that will, I think, especially in-camera visual effects, I think that industry will change significantly. Maybe in 5 years, maybe it will take a little bit longer. But if you look at the already very capable stable diffusion, real-time stable diffusion setups that I've seen, it's actually very scary that you don't need a lot of talent in the future to create like really sophisticated virtual production environments, or you don't even need talent to do the same thing. So I think where we now use a talent and we place them in gigantic virtual environments or in green screen environments, I think that that new technology and those AI models and the way that is integrated in real-time virtual production, I think that will be the biggest impact. Obviously, AI is not is not carbon free, so it generates carbon, but not to the extent that a production will cost that we see now with the large LED volumes. I think in broadcast it will be slower, it will be different, but I think especially in the cinema and drama industry, it will be a big change and it will go fast.
So I might just be like, I'll just do the capture in my basement, and send it over to the.
You need a basement and a computer and a really smart guy now,
and
then you can go. So it's I think like I think in 2019 I saw in California I saw like the first AI models coming to life, and then people say, oh, it will take probably 10 years, and then we will see this on a large scale. And now you can't, like that. Those were language models, so you cannot think of a world without them at the moment. Everybody is using it, and now you see the models that are related to video and content generation, and I think it will go so fast that we will be amazed. I think in the coming 12 to 24 months, we will be really amazed with what's coming. See.
James, what do you think?
I think from a sustainable angle, let's hope in 5 years' time that there's great calculators. Everyone's doing it the sustainable way, whatever that method might be. Everyone will be chasing their goal for 2030 and their net zero target. So I would have thought the adoption there would definitely have increased. But with that adoption and AI and all these things, there's also going to be a massive increase in need for computing power, data centers. I know there's about 160% increase on data centers that we have right now in order to hit that target. So we're going to have to find more and more creative ways to be sustainable. From a virtual production point of view, I think you're going to see it in everyone's houses. You're going to see it in people's lounges. You're going to see it in people's basements. You're going to see it in 12-year-olds' bedrooms, people at uni. I think it's going to become far more accessible. And we've seen that over the last couple of years from the way it's trickled down from film and TV. But it's getting in the hands of creators now, YouTubers, podcasters, all this kind of stuff. So we're just going to see a lot more of it in a lot more people's hands. And there's going to be that opportunity for people that have very little resource to compete on a global scale in creating content. I think that's going to be very exciting.
That is very exciting. But then also it's, I guess, important to have some kind of start getting frameworks and guidelines and data together now before that boom, so that we don't sort of, start off on the wrong foot and kind of end up another 10 years down the line going, oops, I wish we'd thought of this differently.
Yeah, agreed.
Christina, do you want to take us out?
Yeah. Well, we'll start off with, like, I think Gerhard hit the nail on the head, like, have it powered by renewable sources. I mean, a simplistic example could be it's powered by solar panels, right? For example. Have more recyclable material as well for a start. Use actually AI to help automate and create frameworks for the data and the processing, so it's less clunky. I would like to think hopefully someday someone will take inspiration from Jim Gerhard, who worked at owns Red and Gerhard Land. So what makes Red a great example for this is they have their own patented IP for Red code, raw files shot on 8K that can be compressed to such a point that you could use the images to do like an Instagram profile picture, which is tiny, with the maximum resolution for the compression. No one has been able to figure out how they've done it. It's super unique. And if we could see that kind of engineering applied to the assets from Unreal Engine, for example, like that would speed processing time immensely, which would improve carbon emissions. I think more intelligent product development. Megapixel, again, another great example. They've got a power saving mode. So if you take the time and go in, it will say, okay, you're on actually a break. We can see you're on a break, or we know these times. We're going to power down by 50% for half an hour, not completely switch off. So you don't have to have like the upload time, or we'll know to stop at the end of this day and then turn the tiles off. So they very intelligently like mapped the energy per pixel within per tile to achieve some of these features. And I think if all of this like compounded into one magical moment in 5 years' time, then it really would be like we can measure this. We know exactly what we're doing. Like the pre-production time has come down, which who knows, maybe even the shooting time could come down. And it is a proven, viable, sustainable piece, which is also more seamless to use. So you don't have to worry about reshoots or things breaking down. No different to like the default camera mode on a DSLR, where it kind of figures out all your ideal depth of field and everything else that you like. So you don't actually have to learn the other camera settings. We could get everything to that point. And there are some people doing research as well. I think the Foundry, I won't name particular names, but it's not too hard to find. They are starting to create a prototype of an algorithm that allows like green screen, blue, virtual production, on-set extensions, and it's using some AI to basically mesh this all together so you get final pixel. So you could actually map what you're doing on the LED and then remove it and still carry on shooting with the actors and replace with green. If anyone wants some of these articles, I can happily share with Neal, but things like that are actually what real time should be, because right now we say real time, but it's not all 100% real time, but it's the closest to real time we've ever had in our evolution of filmmaking.
Amazing. Thanks so much. James, Gerhard, Christina, Ralf. There's a lot to think about. There is some definite communication that needs to happen, and it sounds like there's a lot of great ideas and a lot of great experience out there that just needs to be shared, collated, and distributed, and that will help get us on our way. Again, I invite everybody to sign up to the Flint's weekly newsletter. This session will be available on video for you to look at later on. Thank you very much again to our guests, and thank you to our sponsor, Vizrt, and we will see you at the next Flint Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Neal.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
You.